When one thinks of going from point A to point B, they generally think of a car, even in today's SUV and crossover crazed world, and that's exactly where Toyota is trying to reinvent themselves. Change, that's a fluid thing. What you're looking at is not an entirely new car. This is a heavy, heavy refresh, which means all the bones are the same. What they have changed is simplification. So instead of having like V6 and 4-cylinder and hybrids, you can have anything you want as long as it's a 2.5 4-cylinder hybrid. There are two choices one can have in terms of moving the thing forward. You can have something driving through the front wheels, or you can have like this one driving through all four wheels. Now we need to be clear with one another. This is like the many all-wheel drive systems that we've experienced from Toyota over the past couple of years, in that there is no mechanical connection between the hybrid propulsion system here and the drive wheels in the rear. Instead, they bring about a low-power electric motor to drive the rear wheels when there is inclement weather, and it cuts off about 40 miles an hour. That brings us to the purpose of this vehicle. If it's only going to be a hybrid, then it should be efficient. Now, there is a very efficient one, the most basic front-wheel drive with the least amount of equipment. That, believe it or not, does 53, 50, 51 combined. And that's a mid-sized car, not a Prius. Then there's this one, this is the fancy one, all-wheel drive, that has a little bit more output. That one still is respectable at 44, 43, 44. So here's some unexpected news. Yes, this has two propulsion systems, but it is not crazy heavy. 3,538 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 1,605 kilograms. Now, if this were the front-wheel drive, meaning not the fancy all-wheel drive we're in, it would be a little over 100 pounds less with that. Oh, okay. I mean, that's not terrible. Actually, it's pretty good. You wouldn't expect a 2.54 that does not have a turbocharger to do that. Now, granted, you're getting the benefit of the electric propulsion system that's giving you that torque down low, or really from zero. The problem, and let's try this again after we make this turn, is the transmission. Most people that buy these kind of things, they're not going to think twice about this being a CVT, but the CVT kind of robs this propulsion system. You see, here's why all of this is important. That propulsion system, it's not bad. It's actually pretty good and delivers good power for this, a mid-size car. But where it falls down, having this transmission, I totally get you're trying to drive the efficiency and probably lower the cost of the componentry and probably drive less warranty claims by having less moving parts. But putting that aside, you're taking away the drivability of this, a car that's meant to be used around town. That's where it makes a difference. At the risk of sounding like the old guy sitting on his porch screaming, "Get off my lawn," there was a day when a basic car meant really basic. Vinyl seats, not vinyl seats masquerading as leather called Softex, and roll-down windows. So what does basic mean in today's day and age? Well, it means less connectivity, the wheels are smaller, the car isn't as attractive. Well, how has that been interpreted here? The most basic front-wheel drive Camry, now the one we're driving is the fancy one with the red leather interior and then the better wheels, but still, even the basic one looks attractive. Why is that? It's not so much the change in design, it's the wheels. Now, back in the day, you could say that you had hubcaps. That hasn't been a thing for a while. These are fitted as standard to even the front-wheel drive car. Now that's in a world where the Mavericks kind of turned that on its head, where you want the Steelies, you don't want the fancy alloy wheels. Then it's about the interior in terms of the difference between basic and fancy. Now granted, one is not going to have things like power seats, heated seats, vented seats. But Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, if you don't have it, you won't sell it. GM is going to learn this lesson the very hard way. Here they've taken that a step further where one can connect their phone, whether it's Apple or the dark side, without wires. That's fitted as standard. And then they figured while you're in there, we might as well throw a Qi wireless charger. So I'm not trying to sound like a marketing company here. I'm trying to sound like the cheapskate that I am. What do you really get for the most basic price of car? Then there's the seat coverings. No, one is not going to have leather. Instead, in the most basic one, it's fabric. Deal with it. You're a cheapskate. You bought the cheapest car. But wait, there's more when it comes to basic. When you're driving down the road in a regular car, something big, or even something a little bit more fancy, you generally don't hear something. What is that something? The road. In this, one of the areas that they save some money on is the insulation around the car, so you hear road noise more in this than other cars. Okay, so it's a practical car. Let's experience it in a practical environment. I don't think anything gets more practical than getting somewhere quickly on the freeway. Here, this is where it becomes a little bit surprising. When I think of cars like Camrys and K5s and Nissan Altimas, I don't really think of ride quality. I don't think of driving dynamics. And here, this is not a heavy vehicle, so we don't have the weight working to our advantage in terms of ride quality. But over not perfect pavement, this is very south in San Diego. You can see Mexico right there. So we have a lot of undulations in the pavement, some gaps, but you're not disturbed. Even if I drive it like a maniac and switch lanes, go in between the traffic here, please don't try this at home. Most importantly, it's not a very big car. Yeah, it's mid-size, but when you look at the wheelbase of this thing, it's significantly shorter than that of like mid-size luxury sedans by about 6 inches. And that's where you would think it would be very choppy to drive on the freeway. That's not at all the case here. So overall, there's like a balance of ride quality, and they do give up a little bit of driving dynamics because after all, this is meant for the much wider audience to drive this thing on a daily basis than say even the Crown, which I drove just before this, that has effectively the same equation of engine, transmission, and even size of vehicle. So rather than playing around of our favorite game, the options game, let's have a discussion about the cost of basic transportation. When one thinks of basic transportation, they think of like a Civic, and believe it or not, those have a base price around 20 grand now. I still think of them as 12 grand. Then you look at something like this where it's a bit bigger. These like K5s, Accords, they've had base prices in the 30s for a while now. They can get into the low 40s depending how fancy they've become. But this, they're trying to reinterpret what basic transportation is, at least how it looks, and what propulsion system. So what does this cost? Believe it or not, the front-wheel drive, which still has some stuff in it like Apple CarPlay, $28,400. But then there's this one. This is the XSE all-wheel drive. What does that cost? $36,152. How do we break that out? Basically, there are 3 different levels. You can go good, better, best, and one can add all-wheel drive to any of them for $1,525. But this one has a couple options. Number one, it has a premium package, which adds things like a head-up display, JBL audio, vented seats, even like a suite of ADAS technologies. That's an additional $4,025. Then there's that color. They call it heavy metal. That's an additional $425. But let's say for the sake of discussion, you want it to look even more special by having a black roof. That's an additional $500. Then we have to pay for one more extra. That is the destination and handling from the exotic port of call of Georgetown, Kentucky for $1,095, which brings us to a total retail price of this, the most expensive Camry on offer. Yes, I picked it for the red seats. $42,220. So let's you and I have a discussion about the usability of this UX in this updated Camry around town. Toyota, if you haven't noticed, they've gone with this toggle switch theme, which is a very good thing. So basically, toggle switches throughout the dashboard here. In this one, yeah, it's got some fancy bits like cooled seats, heated seats, but even basic HVAC controls, those are toggle switches. So if I want to operate the fan here, actually I don't want to use the network, I was using the fan. That's where we get into some troubles, but we'll put that off. And really what they've done here is made this very usable. But here's the thing. It's also a very busy design going on here. Like, you look at this, and I see that it's got a family kind of influence with other Toyotas with the screen here that comes up, and they're using the same multi-information display that we've seen in the Crown and others. But over there, they're kind of forcing that design where you have the vents, it looks like the vent goes all the way across the dash. That's where it gets busy. You could have done something very simple with color and trim that would have made it feel and look better, more classy than what that is with high glass plastic. But putting all of that aside, what we have here is good tactile feel that works not just in this fancy one, which we've learned is kind of expensive, but this same tactile feel, meaning the steering wheel, top of the dash, top of the door panels, is the same in the cheap one, which is what, like $7-8 grand cheaper than this. And let's call a spade. That's kind of a win when you're dealing with basic transportation. But the real difference here, you look at this one, I specifically chose this one because of the red interior. Red is not for everybody, it's kind of a Goomba choice of interior, but this with the gray exterior, it's got some pizzazz for a basic car. So this is not just in the fancy one, they do these unusual color and trim options even in the basic ones, because that brings us back to our discussion with the chief designer of Hot Wheels like 12 years ago. He famously said, good design doesn't cost extra. And this is one of these instances where it doesn't cost extra. You can put any color you want here and it's still gonna cost the same. Why not do something that stands out and make the vehicle more memorable? Think about having someone in your car, a friend of yours, like, oh my God, did you see like Bob's new Toyota Camry? I didn't know Camrys look like that. That's what they were going for here, and I think they kind of achieved it. So yes, this was a departure from our usual driving $100,000 plus something, but it was educational. Why? Because one can have a new car and not have to spend the average price of a new car in the US, 50 grand. And here, a lot less than 50 grand. Now granted, one could have a used car, spend a lot less money, but that's just me. Let's say for the sake of discussion, you gotta get you a new car with a new car warranty. We have proven that they can do that at 30 grand or under. Like, here's an example where we have a car that's kind of easy on the eyes, has some stuff in it, all-wheel drive hybrid, and actually gets good fuel economy, and it's 30 grand. Call me a cheapskate, but that's kind of the win here, and that brings us to the wish list. And this is an open wish list to all manufacturers. Do what Toyota's doing. In other words, I'd like more options new under 30 grand that aren't small, that are interesting, that are attractive, that have some stuff. Granted, I don't expect everything, but have some equipment that gets people excited without having to go in ridiculous amounts of debt to support the average price of 50 grand. Okay, I am rambling. I'm just one man, and this is the point of the episode. I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below, or via our social media, MotoManTV, all one word, MotoManTV, all one word, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, if you want to see the exact opposite of what this is, how about a V12 car from Germany that drives itself and has an airplane business class seat in the back? Oh, and also has a ridiculous 4D stereo system. You can see that episode here. Till I see you in the next episode, bis später.